America, the ultimate underdog story. It's currently the richest and most powerful nation ever, but its journey to the top was about as planned as finding a rogue sock in the dryer. In fact, most of North America sat there, ignored, for over a century after being discovered. Here's a map from just before Christopher Columbus, history's most famously lost sailor, stumbled upon America. The Vikings mumbled something about an island somewhere over here, but nobody paid attention, largely because they thought it was just a giant rock, not a whole continent. So Columbus, convinced he could reach Asia by sailing west, spoiler alert, he couldn't, instead bumped into some Caribbean islands. Columbus, bless his heart, didn't find the spices he craved, but he did find a creative solution to his navigational blunder. He just decided he was close to India anyway. Thus, he affectionately dubbed the locals Indians, grabbed some shiny baubles, and scurried back to the Spanish monarchs for his performance review. "Hey, your majesties, just back from Asia."
"Hey, your majesties, just back from
Fantastic.
Asia. Fantastic.
Where are the spices?
Where are the spices?
Well, about those spices, we haven't quite located them yet,
They have
but they have gold. Lots and lots of gold. Gold, you say? Now you're talking, Columbus. Go back, tell them all to convert, and bring us all the gold. A few years before Columbus claimed the West Indies, because, again, he was really bad at geography, for Spain, the Portuguese, being the clever ones, had already figured out how to get to actual Asia by sailing around Africa. So Spain and Portugal, like squabbling siblings, drew a very important, very arbitrary line right down the middle of the world map. Everything on this side for Portugal, everything on the other side for Spain, they declared, meaning all the non-Christian lands were now up for grabs. The Portuguese then skipped off to Asia to build a proper trading empire, while the Spanish got down to the serious business of conquering their half of the planet. Turns out, all the fun parts of the Americas were down south, brimming with gold, silver, and people, presumably to help dig up more gold and silver. So naturally, that's where the Spanish set up shop. They did send an expedition into North America in 1539, but since it lacked immediate piles of shiny objects, they promptly decided these useless lands up north weren't worth their time. The English, always fashionably late, sent an explorer to North America while the Spanish were still pootering around in the Caribbean. This was a full 16 years before the Spanish even discovered Florida. But then, true to form, the English took a 100-year nap before actually trying to colonize America. England's first attempt was at Roanoke, North Carolina, in 1585. But that very same year, England got distracted by a spat with Spain, and the entire colony just vanished. Poof. So they tried again at Jamestown. This time, thankfully, it worked. Next came the Pilgrims, who landed in Plymouth. These were the kind of strict Christians who outlawed fun things like gambling and, ironically, celebrating Christmas. But despite the lack of festive cheer, America soon became quite popular. Before you could say Tea Party, the entire East Coast was plastered with British colonies. Meanwhile, the French, in their typically dramatic fashion, were busy claiming all the land in the vast middle of North America, just because they could. Fast forward to 1754, and it was time for a good old-fashioned brawl to sort out who really owned what. New France, with a modest population of about 60,000, teamed up with some Indian tribes. That's why they called it the French and Indian War. The British colonies, however, boasted over 1 million people and also roped in some Indian tribes. Who do you think won? Spoiler, the British, proving that sometimes size does matter. Coincidentally, there was also a huge war raging back in Europe. When the dust settled, it was time for a map makeover. France, being petty, gave half of Louisiana to Spain before the European War ended, just to spite Britain. Then, after the war, France was forced to hand over the other half of Louisiana to Britain, along with Canada. Britain now had a massive chunk of America, but also a massive war debt. "Hey, colonies," Britain chirped.
Hey, colonies!
Remember that super expensive war we totally won for you? Yeah, thanks for that, the colonies replied. No problem. Anyway, we're going to start collecting truckloads of taxes to pay for all our generous help. What? You never help us. We're always helping you. And how can you tax us if we don't get a say?
We're always helping you. And
The
how can you
colonists,
tax us if we don't get a
weren't
say?
thrilled about these new taxes. The disagreement quickly escalated from a grumble to a fight, and from a fight to a full-blown revolution. On the glorious 4th of July, 1776, the Americans declared their independence from Great Britain. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the beginning of the United States of America. Or not quite. It took another 5 years for them to actually win that war, and after securing their freedom, they faced a new problem. The government they'd created was a hot mess. The 13 colonies were basically 13 independent countries, united in name only. The new nation was failing, and it was failing fast. So the Founding Fathers, probably fueled by copious amounts of ale, sat down and wrote a brand new constitution,